Today we're going to look at pre-nuclear patterns. We're talking about the intonation of the word group. Yesterday, Mr. Maidment told you about nuclear tones and tails. That's the most important part of the word group. But before we get to the nucleus, we have got, in many cases, other syllables, and it's the patterns of those other syllables that I want to consider with you this morning. The definition of a head is that it starts with the first accented syllable, that's the first syllable that bears tonic stress, and it extends from there up to the nucleus. The nucleus itself is not part of the head, but everything up to the syllable immediately before the nucleus is. One last bit of terminology, that the first syllable of the head is referred to as the onset. So that first example sounds like this. It was easier than I expected. It was easier than I expected. It was easier than I expected. What have we got there? We've got a nucleus on pect. Pect. And a tail which is the id at the end. Pected. Nucleus plus tail. Before we get to the nucleus, we've got it was easier than I it was easier than I, and you can hear that we've got first of all some unaccented syllables. It was easier, and then an accent on ease and some more unaccented syllables. Okay, it was easier than I expected. We've got these low-pitched, that's the pre-head, no accent, no stress in fact within them. It was easier than I, ease is accented, it's an important word. Then we've got unstressed syllables, ear, and some function words that are unstressed, than I. The unstressed syllable of the word expected itself, which is ick, giving a head which extends from ease to ick, and is all said in this example on a level high pitch. It was easier than I expected. Underneath you can see the terms that we're using set out, the pre-head, the beginning, then the onset syllables starting the head, ease, and everything from ease to ick is the head. Then we get the nucleus itself, pect, and the tail, id. And so the maximum structure of a tone group, word group, is a pre-head, a head, a nucleus, and a tail. The only one that you must always have is the nucleus. Whether or not there's a tail depends on whether or not there are syllables after the nucleus. Whether or not there is a head depends on whether there are any accented, tonic-stressed syllables before the nucleus. Whether or not there is a pre-head depends on whether there are any unaccented syllables before the first accented one. So we can put these brackets, these parentheses, to indicate, in one sense, optional elements within the word group, but they're only optional in the sense that they will be there or not depending on what syllables there are. And of course, if it's a long word group, it's likely to have pre-head, head, and tail. If it's a short one, less so. But it's not really a separate choice, it depends upon the words that you use. There's another example. How would you be likely to say that? There are lots of things to do. There are lots of things to do. There are lots of things to do. Where's the nucleus? There are lots of things to do. Do. Okay. So here we've got a nucleus on do. That's the nucleus. Is there any tail? No. So all the rest of this must be pre-head and or head. Are there any accents within this? There are lots of things, there are lots. Accented. It's the only accent, in fact, that we've got here. So this must be the onset syllable. This must be the beginning of the head. And the head is all of that. The head then is lots of things to... What have we got here at the beginning? That's the pre-head. Unaccented syllables before we get to the first accent. There are lots of things to do. There are lots of things to do. Now, depending on the syllables you have in your sentence, it's quite possible to have a head without a prehead, or a prehead without a head. Let's take another example. What did they think of the visit? Well, Peter's disgusted. Peter's disgusted. Peter's disgusted. Where's the nucleus? Dust. Peter's disgusted. So there's the nucleus. Tail, tip. This must be head or pre-head. Now, are there any accents there? Peter's, yes. Pete is accented. Therefore, this is a head. Is there any pre-head? No. Because there are no syllables before we get to the first accent. Peter's disgust. I'm doing all these things with the same kind of high head and high fall, but we could have all sorts of other possibilities. It could be lots of things to do, or there are lots of things to do, or Peter's disgusted, or Peter's disgusted. We'd be varying those separately, but the anatomy, the structure, is the same in line with what I've been saying. Here's another sentence. Supposing I say, this is delicious. This is delicious. Where's the nucleus? Lish. This is delicious. Tail, yes, this. Now, is there any accent before we get there? This is delicious. The way I'm saying it, yes, there is, because I'm accenting this. So, if I say it that way, we've got a head here. This is delicious. On the other hand, you don't have to accent demonstratives. So I could equally well have said, this is delicious. This is delicious. If I did it that way, then this would be unaccented and we have a pre-head. This is delicious. Just as much as if I say, it's nice. It's nice. Nucleus then is nice. It's unaccented, therefore pre-head. It's nice. So we have a very simple pre-head plus nucleus. It's nice. It's marvellous. It's wonderful. He was wrong. There's another example. Nucleus, wrong. He was normally unaccented, function words. So a typical way to say it would be, he was wrong, or he was wrong, or he was wrong. But in each case, we have the pre-head before we get to the nucleus. I give you some arguments in favour of something, then I present an argument on the other side. I might begin by saying, on the other hand, now, what have we got there? On the other hand, nucleus is R. On the other hand, it's a four-rise nucleus. On the other hand, what about this here? On the pre-head, because it's unaccented. On the other hand, preposition plus article. Now, English sentences, English word groups very frequently begin with one or two function words. So very frequently you do get a prehead, but not always. Okay, let's now move on to considering different types of prehead. Most preheads are low. All these ones we've had so far, they've just been low-pitched syllables. There are lots of things to do. On the other hand, well, it's a low pitch, not the lowest possible one. I've described it as a comfortable pitch. One that doesn't move away from what we think, obviously, the sort of bass. You're not pushing it down, you're not pushing it up. Fairly low pitch. The other kind of prehead is a marked prehead, noticeable, stands out, because that's said on a high pitch. The high prehead, perhaps the same pitch as the beginning of a high four, da 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 da, or it might even be higher than that. So rather than saying there are lots of things to do with there are low pitched, I might say there are lots of things to do. There are lots of things to do, and there you've got the same pitch, but there are lots, and that's a high prehead. We mark it in our notation with this little straight line like that. There are lots of things to do. You can actually make it even higher than that. You can say, there are lots of things to do. Almost into falsetto. It can be very, very high, but just think of it as being about the same as the start of the high four. Examples on the handout. First of all, with a low prehead, it was amazing. It was amazing. It was amazing. It was amazing. Then one with a high prehead, it was astounding. It was astounding. I made that very high. That's not quite so high. It was astounding. It was astounding. It was astounding. In a minute we will be seeing the meaning of the high prehead, but for the moment just notice that most preheads, nearly all preheads, are low. High prehead is an occasional variant that can be used for emphasis. Advanced students may like to investigate other possible types of prehead, because I think in real life there are preheads that do other interesting things, but that's quite enough for us to take as our basis. Let's move on to consider types of head. Now, the head, you remember, begins by definition with an accented syllable and ends at the last syllable before the nucleus. We've got four types of head that we recognise in the O'Connell and Arnold system: high head, falling head, rising head, and low head. And we look at them one after the other. First of all, then, the high head. The high head is said on a pitch well above the level of a low prehead. If you think of the low prehead, da-da-da-da-da-da, as a kind of bass line, da-da-da-da, you jump up to a high level of the high head. And it stands out because of this jump up. Remind me. Da-da-da-da. Providing there's a prehead present, you can hear that jump. This actually often misleads people into thinking that must be the nucleus. It's easy to confuse the onset of a high head with a nucleus, but we distinguish them. So the example here on the handout, I'll try to ring you this evening. I'll try to ring you this evening. No pre-head. I'll try, we jump up to a high level pitch and we stay at that pitch for the whole of the head. I'll try to ring you this evening. I'll try to ring you this evening. Oh, there we have it. Okay, it's not the highest pitch possible. I'll try to... No. I'll try, it's just a comfortably high pitch. I'll try to ring you this evening. We mark this head in the O'Connell and Arnold system with the simple stress mark. This can be a bit confusing when you sometimes use it for stress and sometimes to show high heads, but that's the symbol they use. If there are any further stresses within the head, but they're not accented, they don't stand out in terms of their pitch, they use a little raised circle like that. So what we've got here, there are lots of things to do. We've got rhythmic beats on, there are lots of things to do. 3 rhythmic beats, but only 2 pitch prominent syllables, only 2 accented tonic stress syllables. There are lots, there's one of them, lots to do with the nucleus, the onset and the nucleus of these axes. There are lots of things to do. I'll try to ring you this evening. It was a frightfully rainy day. It was a frightfully rainy day. Where's the nucleus? Day. It was a frightfully rainy day. Is there a pre-head? Is there a pre-head? Yes. This is the pre-head. Unstressed syllables at the beginning, unaccented syllables. It was a frightfully rainy, so we've got a head. It was a frightfully rainy, there's the head. And we've got a stress within the head on rain. It was a frightfully rainy day. Now, let's change the nuclear tone. Notice how we can still have the same head before other nuclear tones. There are lots of things to do. There are lots of things to do. There we've now got a low-rise nucleus, do. But listen to the part before it. There are lots of things to do. There are lots of things to do. There are lots of things to do. Just the same as there are lots of things to do. We were just varying the nucleus. The head remains the same, the high head. In fact, the high head is unusual that it can combine very freely with different nuclear tones. And that's why we take it as a kind of default head, basically. It was a frightfully rainy day for rise, but the head was still a high head. It was a frightfully rainy. It was a frightfully rainy day. Rubbish. The sun was shining. It was a frightfully rainy day. High rise, but still got a high head before it. It was a frightfully rainy. So this is one big insight that intonation studies have achieved to make your task easier, that we have independent variables at the nucleus and at the head. If we describe these two things separately, we can then combine them in various combinations. They're not, strictly speaking, entirely independent, but they are partly independent of one another. And it's helpful to look at separately what's the nucleus, what's the head, and what's the pre-head. That was the high head then. We can also have it, of course, with no preceding. Nice example here, yes. No preceding syllables. Why do you want to do it? Why do you want to do it? Nucleus on do. Why do you want to? There is our head. The first syllable is the onset. No pre-head. Why do you want to do it? Why do you want to do it? Or with a rise. Why do you want to do it? Why do you want to do it? that's the high head then. Very simple, high level. Let's move on now to the falling head. The falling head starts on a high pitch and then falls. Not all the way, but some of the way to the bottom. The example we've got on the handout is, I can't be certain. I can't be certain. Now the nucleus is certain for rise. The head is can't be, can't be, can't be. Coming down, can't be. I can't be certain. So it's a falling head because it's so called because it falls. It starts on a high pitch and falls down. We mark it with this little arrow. It's in the Economy book, it's a raised arrow as it is on the handout. Struggling with my word processor, I didn't manage to get this one raised up above as it should be. My graphics presentation program doesn't understand about superscripting, but that's what I would do if it was absolutely ideal. Similarly, the one for the rising head is meant to be subscripted, which I've achieved on the handout but not on the screen. Alright, so this falling head starts on a high pitch and falls. I can't be certain. Look at the second example. I don't think you'd call it cheap. I don't think you'd call it cheap. It's often helpful to whistle tunes, of course, because we cut out all of the distracting information of the voice that is not just the fundamental frequency, but all the higher overtones and harmonics and things. I don't think you could call it cheap. I don't think you could call it... Notice again, we start high for the onset, don't, then come down steadily. Don't think you could call it, but not all the way. I don't think you could call it cheap. I don't think you could call it cheap. Would you like to try it, everybody together? I don't think you could call it cheap. Again, I don't think you could call it cheap. Right. We can have it with the whole head on a single syllable, like this. Please don't. 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 Now, one thing that we notice is that the falling head always goes with a fall rise. There's a very regular relationship that if the head is a falling head, then the nuclear tone will be a fall rise nucleus. And you can think about the falling head then as being a kind of preliminary attempt at the nucleus, an early copy of the first part of the nucleus, a foreshadowing of what's going to come at the beginning of the nucleus. Please is like to be do, part of don't, before, without going all the way down and without the rise. Please don't. I don't think you'd call it cheap. If there's a prehead, of course it might be a high prehead. So with these high heads, we could have had a high prehead like this. There are lots of things to do. It was a frightfully rainy day. Nonsense. You can't manage that, of course, if there is no prehead. The examples on the handout with the falling head, we could do those with a high prehead. It would be like this. I can't be certain. I can't be certain. Or, I don't think you'd call it cheap. I don't think you'd call it cheap. The only difference then is the prehead is the same level or a bit higher at the beginning of the head. At least they kept on trying. They may not have succeeded, but at least they kept on trying. At least they kept on trying. Where's the nuclear tone? Where's the nucleus? Trying. Yes. What is it? Trying. All right. So what do we find for the head? surprisingly. And that's the free head. At least, here's the onset. At least they kept on. At least they kept on. That's a falling head. At least they kept on trying. At least they kept on trying. At least they kept on trying. Here we've got another stress within the head, but it doesn't have any pitch prominence. At least they kept on trying. At least they kept on trying. At least they kept on trying. We could even do that with a high free head. At least they kept on trying. At least they kept on trying. At least they kept on trying. But what we can't really do is vary the nuclear tone, because if you start, at least they kept on, you've more or less got to have a full rise after it. Again, real life isn't quite as absolutely clear-cut as that rule, but that's the rule that O'Connor will give, and it's a very sensible rule to take. Let's move on then to the next kind of head, the rising head. Starts on a very low pitch and rises. Example on the handout, it's absolutely intolerable. It's absolutely intolerable. Try that. It's absolutely intolerable. Da 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 da. Okay. Let's change this one now to a rising head rather than we had the high head. Why do you want to? We can have. Why do you want to do it? Why do you want to do it? Instead of please don't. Please don't. That sounds a bit funny because it breaks this relationship between them. Let's change that to a 4. That's fine. Please don't. Please don't. Please don't. Please don't. Again, we could do that with a high pre-head. It would then give us, it's absolutely intolerable. It's absolutely intolerable. The whole difference is, it's. English is unusual in that it has this combination of a high pitch and absolute lack of accent, lack of beat of a stress type on the syllable. In most languages, there's the sort of link between, if you're going to get a noticeable pitch, you get with it a noticeable stress. But in English, the two are separated out from one another, and you can have them separate. Let's turn over the page and come to our last kind of head, which is the low head, which is said on a low pitch throughout. It's marked in the notation with this low stress mark, secondary stress mark, which hasn't, I think, come out very clearly in the first line of the handout. Sorry about that. Example then, it ought to be perfectly clear. 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 And you can hear how that's just a low-level thing. Da 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 da. Please don't. Please don't. Please don't. It usually goes with a low-rise nuclear tone. Please don't. There are lots of things to do. There are lots of things to do. At least they kept on trying. At least they kept on trying. All right, so what have we got so far? We've got a high head that combines very freely with different types of nucleus, a falling head that goes with a fall rise, a rising head that goes with a fall, and a low head that goes with a low rise. Now, point 4 on the handout. This is one of the terms, concepts that has developed since O'Connor and Arnold wrote their books. The notion of key. That it's often helpful to see the whole pitch range as being movable, up or down. And we can generally raise everything as we say, to a higher key. This is the musical sense of key. A higher key to attract attention, to introduce a new topic. You somehow say, look, come on, here's something new, you must pay attention. To convey a sense of urgency, this is urgent. You've got to listen. Excitement, I'm very excited about this, come on, listen. Emotion, I feel for this. All of these make you raise the pitch. Whereas, on the other hand, if you're feeling detached, you're not really interested in what's going on, you're calm, you're not worried. You're just saying something by the way, as a matter of fact. Oh, and you forgot it afterwards. Or it's an afterthought that's not terribly important. All of those things would tend to be put in a lower key. Many writers, in fact, nowadays subsume the difference between high fall and low fall into key. And it seems that the difference between keys is not an all or nothing thing. It isn't that you have baseline, high key, low key, but that you have a gradation. You can just make it higher or high, depending on the intensity of your emotion or the intensity of your lack of emotion. And that corresponds to what happens with falls, because in real life we get a variety of possibilities of fall, not just two things, a high fall or a low fall, but a whole lot of intermediate gradations. Let's look at the example on the handout. A says, well, we'll have some lunch before we go. Now B might say, our train leaves at 2. That doesn't tell us anything special. But B might say, our train leaves at 2. Now that means, hey, come on, we can't have lunch. We've got a train to catch. Urgency. Excitement, you forgot about that. Emotion, you've got to pay attention to this. Another possibility, A says, we'll have some lunch before we go. B says, our train leaves at 2. Which means fine. Yes, it's 12 o'clock now, we'll have our lunch. We've got plenty of time to have lunch and then catch the train. So, detached and calm and nothing special about it. And yet both of those that I gave you would be categorized as high head, high fall. The excited one, our train leaves at 2. And the calm one, our train leaves at 2. So by introducing the notion of key, we're catering for this difference as well. This is a term that comes from Brazel. Some of you will know of Brazel's writing on intonation. Brazel introduced a whole lot of quite useful concepts, but incorporated them in a framework that isn't really practical in the classroom in many respects, and somehow hasn't got a satisfactory notation to go with it either. And those are among the reasons why we are sticking with O'Connor and Arnold. Let's move on now to point 5 on the handout, ways of adding emphasis. Here are 3 ways, 3 devices that we can use to make utterances stronger, to make them more emphatic. Key, of course, is one of these, but these are other things. The first one is what we can call pitch jumps. And a pitch jump is what you achieve by using a high prehead before a low tone of some kind. So defined on the handout, a pitch jump is a sudden wide change of pitch. A high prehead before a rising head or a low head, or I should have said, or a low nucleus. So if you amend the handout to continue a rising or low head or a low nucleus, a low nuclear tone. Because in fact the examples we've got here involve nuclear tones. The simple one is how silly. Nothing there, but we can make it emphatic by saying with a high prehead, how silly. How silly. How silly. How silly. And that pitch jump attracts attention, you see, it's emphatic. Equally if I say, it's marvellous. my tone of voice belies the words I'm using. If I say, it's marvellous, that's a very calm,
controlled, therefore seemingly thorough-based judgment, a reliable judgment, but by using the high prehead, I'm adding enthusiasm to it. It's marvellous. It's marvellous. It's marvellous. Okay, so that's the pitch jump effect of using high prehead, then something low. Second way to add emphasis is an emphatic head. Now, the first three of our heads that we've had, the high head, the falling head, and the rising head, each have a variant which is emphatic. You can only use these variants if the head is long enough to have more than one accent in it. What it essentially consists of is making further what would otherwise just be mere stresses within the head, making them into accents, making them into tonic stresses by, as it were, repeating the head pattern over and over again. So, first of all, with the high head. That sentence with a high head would be, I simply can't believe it happened. We convert it into an emphatic version of stepping head by, I simply can't believe it happened. Can you hear the head? There with its steps in it. Da 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 da. That's the pattern of the high head. Our onset, nucleus. Da 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 da. The stepping head goes by da 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 da. And at each accent, we have a step down onto a new level. I simply can't believe it happened. I simply can't believe it happened. Which is the way to Oxford? Which is the way to Oxford? A step down, which makes it more emphatic. I was absolutely disgusted. Absolutely, step down, adds emphasis. Compared with absolutely disgusted, no step, no special emphasis. The emphatic version of the falling head is known as the sliding head. Again, you've got to have a nice long head that you can fit several bits of fall into it. So rather than, he didn't literally start to hit me, that's an ordinary falling head, you can get, he didn't literally start to hit me, where we have 3 bites at the cherry, 3 attempts to go down and go back up and come down again. Da, 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 da. Succession of little falls, little part-way falls, one starting on each accented syllable. He didn't literally start to hit me. The emphatic version of the rising head is the climbing head. The rising head would be, I never imagined she'd be so upset. The climbing head has several little rises within it. I never imagined she'd be so upset. I never imagined she'd be so upset. This is a very good pattern for practicing rhythm with, because you can hear the rhythmic beats at each accent. You've got a stress associated with it. I never imagined she'd be so upset. I'm really not at all interested. I'm really not at all interested. I just don't like his face. I just don't like his face. All right, those are those 3 emphatic heads then. The fourth and last way, the third of these, that we can consider in order to add emphasis is to use several nuclear tones. In particular, rather than a high head or a stepping head, you can use a sequence of high fall nuclei. So rather than high head, she was absolutely right to complain. Or stepping head,
She was absolutely right to complain. You can use a sequence of high falls. She was absolutely right to complain. She was absolutely right to complain. You have to be a little bit careful not to do this too much. If you do it too much, you will sound like a Scottish Highlander. She's absolutely right to complain. And it's one of the striking things in Scottish intonation from the point of view of us English. We can do it, but as a very special occasional emphasis device, not as an everyday, every sentence intonation pattern. She was absolutely right to complain. Yes. Nucleus end. I fall to denote finality. Unaccented syllables at the beginning must be a free head. Should we make them a low free head? That, demonstrative, normally accented. Onset of the head extends all the way up to the nucleus. And at that point we reach the end. That's a high head and a high fall. And at that point we reach the end. We could make it emphatic by making it into a stepping head. At that point we reach the end. And at that point we reach the end. Even more emphatic with the high free head. And at that point we reach the end. We could then put the whole thing into a higher key, and at that point we reach the end. And we really do. Thank you very much.